Welcome to the Small Church Podcast, where faith, community, and ministry intersect in the unique context of smaller congregations. I'm your host, Tony Marr, and I'm thrilled to be joined by two men who are convinced they're a little bit more talented than I am.
That is right. I'm Robert Kell, one of those supposedly more talented guys, co-host and fellow small church leader. Together, we're here to explore the challenges, triumphs, and inspiring stories within the tight-knit communities that make up our smaller churches.
And I'm Bruce Montgomery, the one here to bring even more to the table than these two and offer a unique perspective to our conversation.
So whether you believe this talent hierarchy or not, you're in for a treat. If you're a pastor, a church member, or just curious about the world of leadership, you're in the right place.
Each episode, we dive into topics that matter to you, from innovative ministry ideas to navigating the unique dynamics of a smaller congregation.
So grab your cup of coffee, settle in, and let's journey together through the wonderful tapestry of small church life.
This is the Small Church Podcast.
Gentlemen, we're in trouble.
Why's that?
I know we try to not date our show, although we ruined that last week with talking about Super Bowl and all of that, and we'll jump into some of that again later today. But today is Wednesday, February 14th.
Yes.
It is Valentine's Day, and we are spending it with each other right now instead of with our beautiful wives.
Well, it's not like we're doing this at 6 o'clock at night. So it's
really?
it is in the morning.
Valentine's Day? I never know. Carol's only had me here.
It's not like Easter and Thanksgiving, Bruce.
I've only remembered it 3 or 4 times in 54 years of marriage. We're
going to do an entire episode of the Small Church Podcast on
how has Bruce stayed married.
How Bruce made it 54 years.
I mean, Bruce, this this isn't like Easter and Thanksgiving. It's not a moving target. It happens at the same day every year.
Yeah, and I still don't remember. It's just not a thing that logs in with me. And part of it is maybe I just rebel against it.
We don't celebrate it. I mean, at all. Like Melissa and I, it's very intentional. We have not bought gifts on this day or done anything like that in a year. I walked in this morning and said, "Happy Valentine's Day," and we both just laughed. I mean, it was like we just don't celebrate it. But
yeah, you know that's your choice, not her choice.
Not really, because she's the one who brought that up.
Yeah, she was being kind.
I'll just tell you, I appreciate that. I know my wife. And so 25 years in, it is very much our just it is what we do with that. There's other things we celebrate and times we celebrate. Valentine's Day is just a day.
It is just a day. But the spirit of love should
I have a feeling, Bruce, that you might should be here in person because Tony and I are already at odds on Valentine's Day. I know what's coming in a couple of minutes, and we are quite at odds on a lot of conversation today, in a good way, in a loving way, and we'll go have lunch after
love
this if
on
you
Valentine's
want to.
Day?
Yes, in a loving Valentine's Day way. No, not a loving Valentine's Day way, just in a love Jesus kind of way. But yeah.
So welcome to the Small Church Podcast, already in progress. And
so what are you doing for Valentine's Day? Do you buy flowers? Do you if it's such a big spirit of love, how do you guys celebrate that?
Well,
that you can share on air.
Yeah, I can't share a lot of that on air right now. This is a family-friendly program.
All right. Anyway, so this is take 2 of the Small Church Podcast, and we are super excited to have you here today.
Oh goodness, yeah! This is a good day today. We are happy to be with you. Excited that you've chosen. If you haven't already tuned out at this point of the show, if you're still with us,
or grossed out,
if you're still with us, we are thankful that you're here. And glad that you've chosen to spend some time with us, whether you're in your car driving, if you're out for a walk or a run, or if you're just sitting around your office with nothing better to do. We appreciate you spending some time with us. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We've got a fun show for you today. At least we hope that it's fun. We're going to spend some time talking about various stories and surprises. In fact, we're calling this episode Stories and Surprises. We had several of our listeners writing questions. The last 2 weeks we've done these episodes of answering our listeners' questions, and several of them wrote in and said, something along the lines of, what's the craziest thing that you've experienced in your years in ministry? What's the funniest mishap that's happened on the show or in your ministry experience? And it just got us talking and thinking that maybe we should do an entire episode, a lighthearted, fun episode that just explores some of the crazy situations that we found ourselves in over the years in ministry. For me, I've been in ministry on a semi full-time, off and on basis since about 1997. Robert, you're probably around the same time frame, right?
Yeah, 98, 99.
And Bruce, I mean, we're looking at what for you, the 40s?
How about the 60s? 65 was when I started into ministry.
That's incredible. For one of these, I've got a story to tell that was kind of a prompt for this episode. That back in 2007, and I found that because I went and pulled it. In 2007, it's hard to believe, I was doing a blog back in the height of the blogosphere in the blog area. I had a blog that I wrote that had 4 or 5 people that read my blog, and I was proud of my tens and tens of views that I would get on that. And I wrote a blog post called Top 10 Things That I've Heard in Ministry. And it was just a compilation of things that I had said to me that were some of those things that were just completely shocking. They catch you off guard. And you're like, hold on, did that really just come out of your mouth? Did you really just say that to me? And I just put them together and hit post, hit publish on the blog site, and thought nothing of it. Months later, like 6-7 months later, we went on a week-long vacation, and this was in 2007, 2008 when we went on our vacation. And this is when you didn't take computers and check your email on your phone. I didn't have a smartphone or anything like that, so I was fully unplugged for a week. Come back from vacation, sit down at my computer late that night after we got back to check my email, and my email box was filled with thousands upon thousands of messages, and I didn't know what was going on. And then I looked, and they were all comments on this blog post that I had written months earlier, completely forgotten about. Somehow, at the beginning of that week, that blog post got picked up, got shared and shared again and shared again. Christianity Today picked it up and put it out on their site. Places all over the country started sharing it. And I had a message from WordPress that said, congratulations, your blog was one of the top 10 most popular blogs for the week. And it had it listed with like Cats Are Us and all this stuff. And my little tiny blog was one of the top 10 blogs on all of WordPress for that week. And it prompted a lot of great discussion, comments that came in. I had people calling me asking for interviews on stuff to talk more about it. And I had my 15 minutes of fame there for a little while off of this blog post. But it was because so many people had these shared experiences. So many men and women in ministry had things that they'd experienced that left them thinking, wow, people are really idiots, first off. And ministry is difficult. Ministry is hard, but if you can laugh at some of the difficult situations and find the humor in them, if you can laugh at people's just lack of self-awareness, and then it can make some of those difficult moments a little easier to bear. And 20 some odd years down the line, you can look back on it and really laugh and do a podcast episode on some of the ridiculous and funny things that have happened to you over your years in ministry. So our hope for this episode is that you can sit back, you can laugh at some of the stories that we share, some of the things that we talk about, and maybe reflect on some of your stories that you've experienced and say, okay, looking back on it now, I can see the humor in that, even though in the moment it wasn't funny at all?
So I know that you and I have talked about that one particular story before, which is hilarious, and like the way it all came to be, and just, hey, I'm just writing my thoughts here. Just, my mom, dad, and uncle, step something. I mean, they're all like listening to this thing, and that's it. I mean, there's like like you said, 4 or 5 people, 100 people reading this thing, and so you kind of get to that space, but then you get in, and it explodes. But I'm wondering, I know you shut the blog down, but I'm wondering, do you still have the top 10 list?
I went and found it. I actually went and found it this week in preparation for this.
So is it like something like I mean, half the world's seen it apparently. Do we get to hear at least 1 or 2 of them?
Sure, I would be happy to share some of those with you right here.
Because I didn't know that. I was going, this could be a total flop right here. Like, people think we prep this a lot more than we do. We all do a lot of individual work, but we don't get paid to do this. So we sit, and a lot of these types of conversations happen on the fly.
Yeah, so this was a fun one that an elder at my church, we held. I had a bunch of this is when I was a youth pastor, and we had a bunch of our boys from the youth group come over to watch a game with me, to watch a football game with me. Not the Super Bowl. It was not the Super Bowl, but had a bunch of them come over to watch. And the next Monday, I had one of our elders at the church come in and ask to meet with me. And he sat down in my office and he said to me, "We have spent our entire lives trying to protect our children from this kind of secular garbage. We entrust you with our kids and you fill them with this. I cannot believe that you would let our son watch this. Sports are vile, aggressive, and promote competition amongst God's people."
Oh, so it wasn't commercials or like commercials or that lady ran a Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue ad or something like that. Like,
it was the game.
I don't know how to even approach that. Like, I remember doing these youth events and like us blocking the commercials out. Like, I remember one time I was at a bigger church and we had the ability to like fade in and out. And so we had our own commercials made. And so somebody was watching a screen. This was a boring job. They had to watch a screen for the whole 3 minutes the commercials were on. And then we would switch in and out of the commercials and things, which personally, just really transparent, I hated, because like, I like football. I really love creativity.
Yeah.
And like, I love the commercials. That's one of my favorite parts of it. So that's hilarious. I had, when you were reading that, I'm going, man, Tony must have had some really smutty commercials on that show that they were just really upset. But the game itself. No, it was
the game itself. And what's funny is this guy was in the military. And so he was a military guy. And so I had another instance with the same guy who wasn't an elder at our church. He was one of our main leaders at the church. That we held a movie night, and I don't remember what the movie was, but it was something that I felt comfortable showing to a group of high school students. And same thing, he got really upset about the movie that we showed. And I said, "You know what? This is twice now that you've come at me for the content of what I'm exposing to your kids." And I said, "What's a movie that you would like?" And I had in my office, I had a bunch of movie posters of my favorite movies that were hanging in my office. And one of those was Saving Private Ryan. And he said to me, "That is a great movie right there." And I looked at him and I said, "Are you kidding me? That movie is filled with colorful language that I wouldn't show that movie." And he said, "Yeah, but it shows the true reality of war and the human experience." And I'm like, the language in it is so horrible. And so he looked at me and said, "Yeah, that probably wasn't a very good example." And I'm like, you will promote Saving Private Ryan, which I think is one of the greatest movies of all time. Let me state that up front. Love that movie. Would watch it again and again and again. But you're using that as an example of great entertainment, and you think that football promotes violence amongst God's people. I'm at a loss here. So that was one of them. I had another person say to me, this was when I was in Bible college, say to me that the communion at my church that I grew up in was not valid in the eyes of Christ, that it was merely a Sunday snack and a disgraceful mocking of what our Lord did on the cross, because the communion elements didn't sit on a table that said, "Do this in remembrance of me," in the front of the auditorium or sanctuary.
I mean, that's in Second Hesitations. I don't know how you guys missed that. It was really, I mean, it's a big, big part of Scripture there that it has to be on a table. I mean, Jesus sat there with a wood burning tool and carved out, "Do this in remembrance of me," and they carried that table for years. Like, I don't know how you don't have the original at your church.
It was the second reiteration of the Ark of the Covenant.
Sorry.
Did you get a marker? Did you get a marker out and put it on the communion table? Write it on?
Oh, we didn't have a communion table, Bruce, and this was our folly.
Oh,
Yeah,
secular.
yeah.
Secular.
We had a communion preparation room. Actually, I think we were a portable church at the time, and so we were preparing communion in a classroom. How dare we?
Uh-oh.
Problems. We had someone that told me that this is again in Bible college, came back from a summer internship, and we're sharing the highlights of our summer. And the highlight for me of my summer was I got to do my first baptism, and I baptized someone in the Pacific Ocean at Huntington Beach. And it was the highlight of my summer. And I had another student in my class that gets really agitated and says to me, that baptism was not valid in the eyes of God because it wasn't done in a baptistry in a church. And I looked at him and very politely said, "So Jesus' baptism must not have been valid then, right? Because it was not done in a baptistry in a church." And he didn't have any answer for that. So I've got one more that I'll share with you, and then we'll jump into headline news, because it really kind of ties into our headline news that we're going into today. And then Bruce will hear some of your stories, and Robert will hear some of your stories. I've got some other doozies to share with our listeners as we go on. But this is another one from my list of top 10 things said by Christians, which all of these have been so far, and we've gone through like 3 or 4 of those top 10. If anyone would like the rest of the 10, we'll put them in the show notes.
There you go.
But this one was said to me. This was number 6 on my list. Now, we've shared this a couple of times on our show before. I was born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is affectionately known as Sin City to most of the world. I moved to East Tennessee to go to college, but as soon as I graduated from college, I moved back to Las Vegas to be a part of a church plant team there, and was there for 5 years in that. And as being a part of a church plant team, we went to a lot of different church conferences, church leadership events, things like that. And so we had a lot of these different events. And this was said to me at one of those events at a pastor's conference, in a breakout session where we're going around and we're sharing where we're from, where our church is at, all of that. And I shared that I was one of the pastors at a church in Las Vegas. Another pastor said this to me: Las Vegas is Sin City. Christians have no place being anywhere near that town. Jesus would not be caught dead there.
So none of these were really like fun, fluffy kind of sayings. These were all like really like bitter people saying very random stuff that...
Yeah, but in hindsight now, you can see the humor in this.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can laugh. I mean, I'm sure as a 20-something-year-old, you didn't find this very funny, but and you probably handled it way better than I would have as a 20-something-year-old. But yeah, that's crazy.
Crazy stuff. So
insane.
I think that's a good segue into headline news.
It's time for headline news, where Bruce, Robert, and Tony search the world over for the top headlines relevant to the Small Church podcast, and then talk about it. And now headline news.
All right, so our article for headline news this week focuses on the Super Bowl. We just came from the Super Bowl, a great game, but for many people who are not sports fanatics like like the three of us are, the highlight of the Super Bowl is, of course, the commercials. There were 59 nationally televised commercials and then a few segments for local TV commercials, which you can always tell the difference between the nationally produced commercials and the local TV commercials. A 30-second commercial on the Super Bowl this year, the national broadcast was $7 million for a 30-second spot. So 59 nationally televised spots. That's a lot of money that was brought in.
It is quite a few dollars.
2 of those spots were by the parachurch organization He Gets Us, which since 2022, the last couple of years, have had quite a splash. They had a couple of Super Bowl ads last year. They have billboards and advertisements all over the country that their organization has paid for, all in an effort to reach Gen Zers, I guess is what you would say, with the message of Christ, or what they would say is their message of Christ, to begin a investigation into Jesus. And they had 2 spots at this year's Super Bowl. One was a little bit longer than the second one, and those commercials that they aired have churned up the waters, we should say, within the evangelical community. You have a line that has been drawn, and you have some people that are very for these commercials and this organization. Then you have other people that have said things like it's heretical to say these, that it is a heresy for them to be putting these things out there. And you're going to find prominent evangelical leaders on both sides of the line on this. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about this as I think that this is very pointed and an important conversation for us to have this morning. So, gentlemen, what are your thoughts? Which side of the line are you on He Gets Us and their Super Bowl commercials?
Bruce, I'm looking at you. Do you want to go?
I'm looking at you. Do you want to go?
I can.
I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and start.
Yeah.
I applaud when people try to find ways to talk about Christ, and if it's in their skill set, I applaud that, and I think that those who condemn that are like the ones that can condemn some things that you said you did in youth group or you did in church. And I don't know where they're coming from. They're more angry than anything else. And I think church can be a place where you laugh, and I think that can be a place where you can apply different things. And I think the videos, I applauded them.
I think there are a couple of different discussions that we need to have here around this. Last year, their criticism came from the fact of how much money they spent for these pieces.
And they paid a lot more this year.
Paid a lot more this year, but a lot of people had problems with, you've spent $10 million, $11, $12 million on a minute of advertisements. That money could have been used elsewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the huge debate last year. We can touch a little bit on that. I haven't heard much of that being tossed around this year. This year, it's more about the content of their commercials. And I'll be honest, they've done a wide range of commercials in their He Gets Us campaign. I didn't love these. I didn't think artistically that they were as good as some of the ones that they've done before. But the actual content of them is what has drawn the most ire this time around.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff they do is really high-level production and things. So, as a creative, I mean, just watching it, regardless of my thoughts or opinions or a million different things on the stuff, we have, apparently the dogs have some opinions as well. And so, but I love, the production quality of these are really, really, really good. Last year, it was very, I think it was very I don't want to say hate driven, but it was dealing with hate. And so you saw these opposing sides more in a disgruntled way. And this year it focuses more in on love, which
yeah.
I think that, that I don't think Scripture says Jesus it circles the Valentine's Day, which apparently, Bruce, it is a biblical holiday that we have messed up and missed out on. But so yeah, I think that there's some redeeming points in there and things for me.
sorry, excuse me. I'll say this up front because I probably won't say a crazy amount. Like, I tend to have these conversations in person, not where, like, look, if you're somebody who's listening and all you have to do today is grab, 15 seconds of what I say and try and make me YouTube famous or canceled or whatever. I mean, I guess that's your life, but I don't think I'm that interesting. But like, I tend to have these conversations in person because my friends who are LGBTQ, my friends who are, struggling and on a side where it feels like the church hates them, it feels like God hates them. I tend to sit more in a space of personally having these conversations, and I am not against leveraging an ad or a movie or something to start that conversation. So if I can use this as a conversation starter, I'm totally good with those things and kind of leaning into that. The ads themselves, everybody's gonna have their opinions, and I don't want to get, like I said, I don't want to get crazy deep into this theology wise. I struggle with some of it. I just don't see. I don't see how I don't see the move to getting to Jesus and to getting to that space. And just because he gets us I just think there's some gaps there. I mean, I think what I said to you before the show that, I mean, we'll see where this goes, but it seems to be a lot of love and not a lot of truth when it comes to how do we navigate and journey certain things with people. And that's why I like personal conversations, because I mean, I can sit and love somebody really well. And I've sat on my couch with friends who would say that they grew up in the church, or they used to be Christians, or they lived in this space. And this conversation started with, it was like they were ready to just have these hard, like, yelling conversations, because, it was like, hey, let's, you want to talk about, what I think about, the Bible and how it interprets certain things or topics or social conversations that are happening in our society today. I'm more than happy to do that. And I have them at this tone. I have them at this level. I don't get bent out of shape. And my conversation always starts with, tell me your story. And we sit for a couple hours sometimes just telling stories, and I'll ask more questions, and we laugh together and we cry together and we sit in these places, and I don't see people walk out of those conversations going, you are so right, because my goal isn't John Wayne one-liners. My goal isn't that space. My goal is to sit, and I think that's where Jesus would have been. I think he would have been in those places. And so, is there some truth in these? Yes. I just think there's some tension as far as, like, the bigger picture. And I'm not willing to go where I've seen some pastors go with some of this, but I just, there's some tension that I'm working through. So,
but I look at through their response to some of the negative reactions that came to the Super Bowl. They said that in the 24 hours after the Super Bowl, they had over 750,000 people visit their website. That's 750,000 people that at least were interested in what they had to say. So it prompted some sort of response from 750,000 people because of their Super Bowl ad. It got 750,000 people to pull out their phone, pull out their computer, and go to their website, where there are resources there that are going to help them dive into some of those questions that you're asking. Now, I will say, I wish that there was more on their website. I spent some time perusing their website, going through all the different leaks and looking through. I couldn't find anything on their website as far as a plan of salvation. I couldn't find anything as far as, okay, so you've got me here. My life is a mess. Now what? It may be there. So I have to be fair. It may be there, and I just didn't click on the right article. I didn't watch the right video. But I couldn't find anything that said, now what? Now what do I do? Here's what it truly means to follow Jesus. They answered a whole lot of questions with more of their videos. But as far as now what do I do? I want to know what life isn't working. I want to know what it looks like to try this Jesus thing. I didn't see any of that. So I wish that there was a little bit more of that. But for all of these naysayers out there and reading some of the different things that people have said, some really, really harsh things that some people have said, I look at these and they sound a lot to me. The religious leaders who are saying this, and there's a lot of very prominent pastors, very prominent Bible college and seminary leaders that have said some public comments really chastising He Gets Us and their campaign. And I read their words, and to me, it sounds a whole lot like the religious leaders of Jesus's day who are coming after Him for the exact same things, saying, what are you doing spending all of your time with these people? What are you doing spending all of your time with sinners and prostitutes and these people, which are what these commercials are showing? These commercials were depicting people loving the unlovable, caring for the people that evangelical Christianity tends to turn our face away from, and saying, no, these were the people that Jesus loved. These were the people that Jesus cared for. And sure, maybe that commercial didn't dive right into the sin issue that needs to be addressed at some point in our journey. And of course, our Christian journey, at some point, we have to address the sin, and there has to be repentance, and there has to be a turning from that. But if we look at the life of Jesus, first he met the felt need of people. He met them where they were at, and it's why He ultimately was killed, because of that. Because of the people that He chose to hang out with, because of the people that He chose to hang out with, because of the things that He was doing and those that He was associating Himself with. And so I read so many of these comments of people going after the creators of this content, and I say, you're sounding a lot like the religious leaders in the time of Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to not get way on the right and left either way, and I'm not declaring who would be right and left. I hate that phrase, extremities. I don't tend to get with the grandfather clock extremities of which way people think like that. People who would be overly for or overly against, something along those lines. I think that there's a lot of things about following the way of Jesus that we get wrong. We live a very American culture that doesn't always sit very well and love very well in that space. And so, yeah, I mean, if somebody's just saying Jesus wouldn't have been there, I think that's a really, missed and mixed view of how everything moves and goes, because I do think Jesus, and I think whether it's the woman at the well or Zacchaeus, or so many other stories that we could look through in the Gospels where Jesus sat with people who would be, Zacchaeus is one of my favorites because Jesus walks in the town, he could have met with anybody, and we talk, and in our world, if you were showing up, meet with the president, meet with a governor, meet with a principal, somebody who can influence a lot of people, and Jesus did. He met with somebody who could influence a lot of people. It just wasn't who we were comfortable with. And so the idea of sitting with people that make us uncomfortable or we disagree with, man, Jesus, one, we probably shouldn't be uncomfortable because Jesus just found a way to sit with people. But he, like you said, he saw a felt need, and he also pointed them towards truth because he is that. And so he gave them a way how do I want to say that? He gave them a way to move from the life they were living to a life that was full, to a life that was, that was abundant, that was overflowing with His grace and His goodness and His mercy. And that requires change. And that requires us moving away from some things, which is some spots that those are some of the tensions I have. Like, I don't feel like we move people very well. I don't feel like, a little bit like you said, I'm looking at their reading plans here, and it's, 3 days or 4 days and stuff like that, but I don't know that it moves people really well to a good next step with following Jesus. So how do people sit? And there's something they can click, find a group near you, but again, million questions and all that are kind of irrelevant to this.
I went down that rabbit hole of what does that look like to find a group. I couldn't find a group anywhere near me. So it seems like most of the groups are online groups, which maybe that's good for some people. as an old guy sitting here, I'm like, well, where's the human connectivity that's not online?
I was journaling the other day, and I journal a lot, like most people would blog. I don't journal really well, but I was literally saying that same thing, just kind of in this private space of mine, that like we're more connected than ever. But are we really communicating? Are we really, if you can get in a meeting and turn your face and your voice off, am I really in a meeting with you? And I think that there's so much to be said for sitting face to face with people. So, I mean, we talk about that here. I know it's not really always possible for Bruce to be with us, but there's a lot missed in the fact of him not being present with us. Because one, we love his presence and we love sitting with him, and the trio together is always better than just two and one of us on a screen. But also there's a lot to be said in his body language and his voice and him being able to step in. So with that, Bruce, I don't know what you want to add or step into there with them.
Seeing my face is not a pleasant thing. So
it's beautiful, man. I hope I'm as pretty as you when I'm your age.
I've over the years, Tony, I've had similar experiences showing movies, doing things. I applauded anything in the Super Bowl that was positive for Christ, and I think that telling that story is going to be more memorable than somebody standing up in front of them and talking to them about it. And Tony, you're a storyteller. Robert, you're a storyteller. I'm a storyteller, and that story is a wonderful way to carry truth. And these movie things that we saw, the I get at things that were there are stories, and those people are going to remember those much longer than they do if somebody scolds them and says, you need to do this or do that. And I really, if there's anything I could have done where I was to monitor the commercials, I would have done that. And I love watching those commercials. Some of the other commercials, I just couldn't see why they had any relevance to anything. But these were, Tony, I think they were well done. And yeah, maybe they showed some ugly things happen, but how do we respond to ugliness? And how do we respond to stories?
I guess I just don't understand why such negative backlash from the Christian community, and the things that I'm seeing as I'm reading through some of these right now. Some of the things that people said, that they framed evangelicism with a leftward tinge, communicating the respectability of certain sins over others in our culture, although I'm not sure the ad even communicated that the respectable sins were sins at all. They had 30 seconds. They had 30 seconds to try to communicate something to the largest broadcast TV audience in the history of broadcast television. They had 30 seconds to try to communicate something, to spark something in them on a very taboo topic of spirituality and Jesus, to try to get them to go and explore more. And so they put a lot of time, they put a lot of effort, they put a lot of money, a lot of resources into this. And I guess I'm just having a hard time with such the negativity coming from other Christians, other believers. If the secular world wants to criticize the artistry of it, I told you guys beforehand that USA Today they ranked all 59 ads, and they had both of the He Gets Us ads ranked near the bottom.
44 and 55.
44 and 53 or something like that. I don't remember the exact.
I was glancing at it there a second ago. You mentioned it. I hadn't seen that ranking at USA Today, but yeah, you and I had talked about the two commercials the three that we thought were probably on the high end was the Kia commercial with the girl ice skating for her granddad, Dunkin' Donuts, and Like a Good Neighbor. And so two things I'll say, those were 1, 2, and 3. The neighbor, the Arnold, the Dunkin', and the ice skating, the Kia, were 1, 2, and 3. And and I was just glancing while we're sitting here, and this is, I don't know, the beauty of technology and the drain from me right now of it. But he gets us Twitter page or X page. What are we supposed to call that silly platform now? Anyway, all of that to
X,
say,
formerly known as Twitter.
I'm so tired. Like I'm so tired. But they actually took, and when that came out during the Super Bowl, they did a whole ad that said, Jesus says, love your neighbor. And so it is absolutely hilarious. And so they are creative. To answer as best I can the question, I think that the problem is people don't want to converse, they want to yell. People want to be heard, not have a conversation. And I think for me, that's the tension. When I think about like following Jesus, I mean, I was reading this week and just this idea of following Jesus, apprenticing under Jesus, and moving through that. I mean, we use the word, disciple, like to be a disciple of Jesus, and in that space that becomes a disciple that makes disciples. Like, we spend so much time trying to do things, but like really it's more about training. And you and I would talk about that with sports and faith and everything else. We're training ourselves to align and to follow more closely to the way of Jesus, or to be a better guitar player or basketball player or podcast person. And I think that tension comes when there's just people who they're not, man, this might make me tweetable. Man, I don't want to say this. I want to say it. I'm trying not to. There are a lot of people who say they're Christians, but they are not disciples of Jesus. And I understand Scripture says that, but 63% of America would say that they are a Christian, and only 4% would say that they are an apprentice, a follower, a disciple of Jesus. And we have 63% of people who want to stand on a soapbox and yell. And I think Jesus would have sat with both of those people. He sat with Nicodemus, and then a chapter later, he sat with the woman at the well. It's just, Jesus Jesus did live in a very unique space. And while anybody can tell, I'm not overly, I'm not, my meter would swing a little bit away from the overall he gets us platform. I'm definitely not just going to throw them under a bus, and I would rather have a conversation. I'd rather sit with someone who's doing this and hear more, someone that is leading this and hear more, and have a conversation to where I can understand. Me hopping on, any social media platform or just blasting them here doesn't move anybody's faith needle more towards full in Jesus. It is draining, it's depleting. And so I just struggle with this. Are the people that yelling, are they really Christ followers?
Yeah, and I would challenge those people if any of them are listening. And I know that some of our listeners here probably side more with you than with me.
I would say there's both. I would assume.
I'm sure there is.
750 to 1,000 people, it's varying. Yeah, absolutely.
And instead of, like you said, instead of going on X, formerly known as Twitter, and making a statement like this, why not reach out to he gets us and say, hey, could I write some content for your site? Could I put something that maybe says, okay, now here's where we go with this, and you can address the things that you want addressed, because they need to be addressed at some point in that journey. The sin issue needs to be addressed, and I think that everyone from He Gets Us, I think, I can't speak for them, would say, yeah, at some point in the journey that needs to be addressed, that needs to be discussed and talked about. But in a 30-second Super Bowl ad, we're just trying to get them to our website to get more information on this stuff.
And that's where I think you and I have both said, and you would be a little more for, if we're just talking for and against, and I don't like those words at all, but you would be a touch more, you and Bruce a little more for. I would be a touch more like, I've got heavier questions that I'm wanting to process through. But I think that in that space, that's where we've all kind of said the website just seems to, at least from what we can find, to come up a little bit short, and to, like, our job isn't just to get people to Jesus. Our job is to go and make disciples. And there's got to be a plan. There's got to be some version of a plan that we're not just omitting, like the last command Jesus gave us as he, ascended off this earth.
Yeah, I love this quote from Jason Cornwell. He said, "The He Gets Us ads aren't systematic theology lectures, they're conversation starters. Some of you need to use your time better than to be angry at an ad that says Jesus washed feet." And I think that sums up what I think we're all trying to say.
Agreed.
Yep. All right. Any final thoughts on that, Bruce?
To face, Tony, there are people who don't want to listen. They just want to argue. And Aristotle talks about the whole idea of a conversation. And in our society, we're not really ready to listen, but we're really ready to get angry. It doesn't have to be on a TV thing. It'd be a conversation you have with somebody like that person when you were a youth minister, just looking for something to pick on, something to be angry about, and not even listen to what the content was in front of it. I know I'm going to just disagree with this the minute it comes on. And it seems like some of the people you talked about knew when that commercial came on, I'm not going to like it. I'm just not going to like it. I'm not going to laugh. I'm not going to like it. I'm going to go get a Coke out of a refrigerator. I'm going to do something else instead of giving it a chance. And in conversations, we have the same problem. We have people who just don't want to listen. And anything we say, they're going to argue with or get angry about. And I can't. Life's too short to get around and argue about movies or little clips, 30-second clips about something that you didn't like, when actually somebody's trying to do something good.
I agree. What are your guys' thoughts? I want to get this really quick. We touched on it at the beginning. What are your thoughts on the fact that they spent $14 million on a minute worth of ad space?
Yeah, I think it was 30-second ad was $7 million. And so they spent, so they had a 15, was it a 45 and a 15? I know the one short ad was 15 seconds. Yeah. I just saw that timestamp. I don't remember. So yeah, they spent, like you said, 12 to 14 million. Man, I always, if I was smart enough to have that good of an idea and I had the funding and I could get the traction, I probably would spend the money.
The wheels were spinning there.
They were.
I could see that.
They were. Because I've struggled with it. I mean, I do. I'm going, man, $14 million. You want to be like Jesus? Like, I mean, I literally was just looking. They only have 66,000 followers on Instagram. I mean, they don't have, I mean, they're not like these, to me, these aren't, people are watching the videos, they're going to their websites, and I haven't looked at TikTok or Facebook yet. But I mean, that's a lot. I mean, I just wonder how much they're really moving the needle of that whole thing. I'm terrible with this kind of stuff. I'm such an old man when it comes to things. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know that their followers and stuff based on what it's showing on here is moving that needle a lot. I would think that the goal would be, if I was spending $14 million, is how do I get people following and engaging and not just grumpy people that are sitting out and doing that. So anyway, I don't know. This is my thought.
Yeah, what number is worth $14 million?
Yeah.
I don't have the answer to that.
I don't either.
I look and see 750,000 people within 18 hours visited their website. To me, that seems pretty incredible. That seems pretty great, but I don't know how you qualify.
What's the long term?
What's the long term?
If it doesn't pop back up in your feed the next week, or the next day, there's a good chance that unless you are a person that does what we do, that you're really connected to church, you're really connected to faith, you're reading about these things, people are bringing it up in your feed, I think there's a real chance you forget about it. And so, I know God's word won't return void. For all of you all who hate them, I mean, what Satan intended for evil, God used for good. I mean, I think there's a whole lot of good. I mean, for all of you all who are like, yeah, this is great, God's word won't return void. For all of you that this is the devil, what Satan intended for evil, God used for good. I don't know what their people's beliefs are. I'm on neither one of those crazy extremes. I'm on both of those extremes at the same time. I believe that like God's working, and I don't have to kind of sit there. So the money, I probably would if I had it.
Yeah, it's not my money. I mean, they're a nonprofit. They have to clear everything with their board, and so I don't have a problem with it. I think that they got 750,000 some odd people to come and check out Jesus.
The question is somebody threw a hissy fit on Elon Musk one time about, with the money you have, you could solve the water problem in our world, our entire world, and still be a billionaire. And his response, to some extent, and I'm sure that I will probably be less snarky than him on some level, was people with tons of money and maybe way smarter than me for a long time have been trying to fix this and haven't. Bring a plan to the table. If you bring a legitimate plan, I'll fix it. But it can't be something that is kind of fixed for a minute and it's not sustainable, because that's been the problem. Yeah. And so I think that's the thing is like, okay, so they spent $14 million. Like, well, you know how, okay, they could, if they fed people for a day, that's good. If they could inspire the people of Jesus, you 63% of churchgoers that call yourself Christians that maybe aren't doing anything to engage culture, society, to sit with people that Jesus would have sat with, to meet the physical and felt needs of people that Jesus met the physical and felt needs of. Maybe that would be the best $14 million ever spent if it could move the needle.
Yeah.
You don't want to see he gets us out there? Go fix the problem.
Yeah, I agree with you 1,000% on that. I think that was great. All right, let's call it quits on headline news and get back to some lighter, funner stuff. That was headline news.
And that was headline news.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. And may God have mercy on your soul.
Headline news.
All right, so Bruce, you have a story that you've shared with us about some flying communion and some mishaps that you had on a Sunday morning not too long ago. I'm sure that our listeners would love to hear that story on the show today, as we are spending the rest of our time today talking about crazy things that have happened to us, funny moments that have happened to us over the course of our ministry journeys.
Well, I've mentioned it before, but Tony and I worked at the Storytelling Festival in the past, and we ran something that was there for people to come and tell stories. And I had to get there early to set things up. So I wasn't going to preach that Sunday, but I wanted to make sure everything else was right on Sunday before I left the church to go to the storytelling. So I didn't even dress up. And I was in the back of the sanctuary, and one of our senior citizens came over and nicely said, "Do you realize there's no communion up there? There's no communion on the communion table or anywhere on the
At least
stage."
You had a communion table.
Yeah, and it had the right words on it too. But anyway, I looked at it and I was shocked, and I rushed up to the communion prep room, which was in a very bad place. Our communion prep room was right behind the pulpit, about 10 feet. And so I had to get on the stage to get into the communion prep room to see what was going on. When I did that, one of the other men came up and he helped me, and we went and we poured the communion, got everything ready, and we were going as fast as we could. One of the elders get up there and have the long prayer, and he did, and we were coming out. And as I came out of the communion prep room with 8 trays of bread, I forgot there was a step. And the next thing I knew, I was sprawling across the stage and 8 communion cups are looking like Frisbees all around the front part of the sanctuary. And that was the day that I decided to retire. That was it. You can't get any lower point than that, so you may as well stop then. And I think people at the church still remember that today, because some of those Frisbees had pretty good distance. They got out 3 or 4 rows. And but it was just embarrassing about something that I consider to be the highlight of the service. We turned it into something else because somebody didn't get something done, and we rushed in to try to fix it. And we had to do the fix almost in front of everybody. The room was right there, just behind the pulpit. And so they knew we knew we were doing what we were doing, and I really did. That was the day I realized it's time. I've had 50 some years in ministry. It's time to retire.
I think we've all had the moments where we've said something that didn't come out quite right. We had the best of intentions, but either through a fumbling of the phonics or just a skip in our mental capacity, a brief lapse of clarity, we've said something that either as soon as it came out, we realized, what did I just say there? Or we've said something that later on someone said, probably our wives, said, did you realize what you just said on stage there? Or in that statement? Can you guys share any of those moments with our listeners?
And I told you guys, I don't have much at all. I probably have tried to forget those types of things, and my ministry life has been pretty uneventful as far as crazy stuff. Like, I've never thrown Frisbees, and I wasn't smart enough to write a blog, so I didn't get blog famous for 15 minutes. So, yeah, I told you I should host this thing. And so guys,
you are hosting this thing.
This whole thing, like, have you ever said something you wish you wouldn't have said, or you came out wrong?
Oh, I've had a couple. I had one that kind of mini went viral. That I use a lot of storytelling in my teaching, and I was teaching on the disciples and Jesus going across the Sea of Galilee to the Decapolis, and the storm comes up, and the disciples all think they're going to die. And so I'm talking about how these men are fishermen, and they have lived on the sea. These guys have made their livelihood on the sea. They've grown up on their sea. Their dads had them on the sea, and they've experienced storms before. So this was a major storm. And then in kind of a storytelling mode, I go into, they lived through the storm of 4 BC, and talking about the storm of 4 BC. And they said they lived through Grandpa telling them the stories of the storms of 24 BC. And I said, and Grandpa's sitting on his front porch in the rocking chair and saying 4 BC was nothing, 24 BC. We came out in the morning. There was nothing on the seashore. And I said, just pieces of ship all over. And in my moment, the way that it came, everyone looked at me, and I realized what I just said. And I said, pieces of ship. And I just pieces of ship. And I just kept saying it over and over and over. I couldn't recover. And finally, someone, I think my creative arts pastor said, Tony, stop. And they're like, boat, pieces of boat. There were wood all over. And I just kept saying I couldn't recover. And we had a bad sound system. And the way that it came out didn't sound like I said ship. It sounded like the P was another word. And that one, people had a lot of fun with that one for a long time. The other one that I had that really stood out, and thankfully this was before social media was a thing of any kind. I think maybe you had what was the one, the first one that came out? I don't even remember what it was called now. MySpace. I think maybe you had MySpace back then, but there wasn't any Facebooks or
I tried to log into my
Instagrams.
MySpace about a month ago and couldn't get in. I usually do that every couple of years, and for some reason I can't get in now.
I never had a MySpace, but I was back in college, and I had a group fly me out to Catalina Island in California to be the speaker for a youth conference. And I was young and way over my head, had no business being the main speaker for this youth conference. And so was really excited about it, and got to spend some time with some of the people that were there. And there was this there was this boyfriend, girlfriend. I think they were in college actually, and they were there as sponsors for. They were there as like sponsors, counselors for the conference, for the event, and got to spend a lot of time with them. And they'd been dating, and their relationship hadn't been really what it should be. And so they had made the decision that they wanted to really make Christ the center of their relationship, and really make prayer and studying together a priority, and purity and all of that in their relationship. So the last night of the conference were, sharing all these stories of what had happened. And I have them up on stage, and I have my arms around the two of them. And I said, this is so-and-so and so-and-so. And they have decided this week that they want to have a 3-way relationship. And in my mind, what I meant was the two of them and Jesus. But I've got them, I'm in between them with my arms around them. And I said, they want to have a 3-way relationship. And I meant it in the most holy, perfect moment. And everyone just starts dying. And they both look at me like, what are you talking about? Like, with Jesus. They want a 3-way relationship with Jesus, the two of them. And that was another one that I just couldn't recover from.
Oh, yeah, you can't recover from that. You're done.
There was zero impurity in my mind at all. I was so happy at the moment. I was like a 20-year-old college student who's just thrilled to be a part of this moment, and just not thinking that what the dirty minds that were present.
But you got their attention.
Yeah, not meaning to. But those are two that I've had that immediately come to mind. Bruce, how about you?
One other time, I still remember, even in the same congregation, I was preaching a trial sermon, and it wasn't really coming through into the sanctuary very well, because they had a new sound system. And when they found out I was preaching to the parking lot, they fixed it, and it got real loud all of a sudden when we were there. I think that because they missed half the sermon, they thought I preached shorter, and they'd probably hire me.
I was at this camp one time, and I was helping run it, and I was helping lead the week. And the thing is looking back, is what should have been the problem was probably the sketch we were doing. This is 25 years ago. And we were doing this pickup line game. And the thing was, there was these two girl counselors sitting there, and this guy would come up on stage, he would say a thing, and they were sitting, and it looked like a couch. But then as he would go to sit down, there was no chair in the middle, and it was a sheet, and he would fall through to the floor. And it was a funny thing. And so this word, like, I had taken my students there as a camp, and then I came back with some other students to help the last week and to clean up. And so I've been to the camp twice, and there was this word that we just used, like, we're going to test your stud ability. And we did this. So we said that word a ton, throughout the entire summer. And this one guy comes up, and he's like, after it was over, and was not concerned with the fact that, you must be from Tennessee because you're the only 10 I see, or, your dad must be a terrorist because you're the bomb, or, like literal lines that these guys were told to say if they didn't have them. Sometimes they had their own, which always made me nervous, but even as a young guy. And this guy comes up and is like, I don't think you should be. And I just like, I'm ready to get hammered here. Let me talk to me another guy, and he's just like, do you know what a stud is? And I'm just going, where is this going? And he said, it is a horse used for mating. You should not be saying that word on. I'm like, dude, like, of all the things we did up there, that is your concern, I believe. It's a lot like your guy with the whole, let's watch Saving Private Ryan instead of Elf. It's just this whole like crazy insanity of, yeah, I get that's a great movie, one of the greatest movies of all time, but it's not something we can show to our middle schoolers at church camp. And so, it's just sometimes people hear things, and what sticks out to them and what matters to them so much is really a huge deal.
Yeah, really is. I had one time I almost killed a group of teenagers that me and a friend of mine ran the morning show for a big summer conference, a big week-long high school summer conference. And so our job was for the morning service, we were the MCs. We were the fun entertainment. We would do these silly games on stage where we'd bring them. There were probably 1,500 high school students at this conference. And so the one morning we had set up that we had this great game that we had like a roulette wheel that had all sorts of crazy items on the roulette wheel. And so there was like baby food, and there was brownie mix, there was pudding, there was toothpaste, there was just all sorts of different, some of them were good, some of them were disgusting. And then we had this giant plexiglass board that faced out to the auditorium. And so the volunteers would come up, they would spin the roulette wheel, and whatever it landed on, that was what they were chose. They were blindfolded when they would do this, and then we would put that item on the plexiglass board, and they would have to eat it off of the plexiglass board. And everyone out in the audience would see it smearing all over, and their tongue licking the board and all this, and it was going to be this hilariously funny game. And first person comes up and gets chocolate pudding, and they put it on, and it's funny, and everybody's laughing, and everyone's great. And then somewhere down the line, someone got Crest toothpaste. And so I've got this tub, this fresh thing of Crest toothpaste, and I go and I squirt it on, and all of a sudden someone starts screaming from the back, "Stop, stop!" And this guy comes running down the aisle. I'm like, what is going on here? Is this about to be a terrorist attack or what's? He's just running down the aisle, and everyone, 1,600 high school students and adult volunteers are looking. He runs and jumps up on the stage. He gets right up in my face. He grabs the toothpaste and goes, "You're about to kill these kids." And he looks and he says, "Look at the fine print." It says, "Warning, do not ingest." And you just ruined our game, buddy, but you saved me from probably a lawsuit, so thanks a lot. About to feed kids toothpaste.
How dare you? Yeah, I got nothing. I'm telling you, I'm lame. I'm a lame person.
Bruce, one of the craziest stories that you and I experienced together was, and I've shared this one off mic before, is several years ago, Bruce and I were working with a church that was not in our area. It was a church that we had gone to several times before, and had done some work, some long-term strategic planning with their church, and we're doing some work with their staff and staff development stuff, and then also working with their senior minister who was going through some really difficult personal things. And so we were doing some work with him. And we had gone and we'd spent 3-4 days working with their staff. I had taught their Sunday morning services, and then we had lunch with some of their key staff, and then we were sitting down talking with their lead pastor in his office, and he was sharing with us some very, very personal, intimate things about some of the struggles that he was dealing with. He was really wrestling with whether or not he could continue in ministry. His depression and mental illness was really taking control of him, and he just wasn't sure with some of the personal things he was dealing with if he had the emotional and mental capacity to continue on in ministry, and was really vulnerable. And we talked through some of that. Then it was time for us to leave. So Bruce, my dad, and myself, we get in the car and we begin the 7-8 hour drive back home. We're about 2 hours into our drive, 2-3 hours, and we get a call from the minister saying, "How dare you guys? How dare you violate the confidentiality and the trust that I put in you?" Like, what are you talking about? And he said, "An hour ago, I got a call from the head of the elders. Everything that I just shared to you in confidence, he knew. You're the only people that I've told this stuff to. You're the only ones that we've told. How dare you? I can't believe that you would do this to me. They're going to fire me. They're going to, my life is over because of you guys. You have ruined me because I trusted you." I'm like, we literally have been driving in the car. We haven't talked to anyone in the last 3 hours except the three of us. We have not told anyone what has happened. He said, "I don't believe you. There's no other way that they would have known this stuff. There's no coincidence. I haven't told anybody else." And literally an hour after you guys left and I finished this conversation, that we didn't say anything. Long story short, Bruce, you remember this. We find out that they had a guy in their church who actually ran their audio video department, ran their sound booth, that owned a audio video company. It was his business. And within his company, he sold surveillance stuff and all this kind of stuff. He had tapped all of the phones in the church and wired recording devices in all of the offices and meeting rooms within the church, and had been recording everything. And so the FBI actually got called in. The local police got called in, and they said there's evidence of tampering here, of phone taps and recording devices, but they didn't have the equipment or technology to be able to get it all out. So the FBI came in, but this guy had been monitoring everything, and so he knew that the FBI was coming, and so he got in overnight and removed everything, because being the guy who ran their sound booth in the audio video department of the church, he had keys to the church, and so he just came in the middle of the night and got everything out that he could have. But the FBI come and said, yeah, everything, we can see the remnants, we can't find any of the stuff, but we see the remnants of it. And these phones were all tapped, there were recording devices and all of this, and someone was recording your entire conversations that were taking place over the course of who knows how long. That's one of the craziest things that I've ever experienced, craziest stories that I've heard in ministry.
I remember that.
How bored would you have to be
to sit there and just monitor hours upon hours of conversations of your pastor and your church staff?
Because, I mean, as a pastor, 99.9% of those conversations are really lame.
Yeah, very true.
Really? A pastor's conversations are lame?
I mean, they're not entertaining enough to want to hear. I mean, it's not like it's a Netflix show, or it could be. That's our $1 million idea right there.
Netflix show about pastors' conversations
that are being like a guy is like streaming his church's stuff, and he's watching everybody, and he creates tension all through a small town with video feed in the church that he does.
I don't think that we would make it very long. I think that show would get canceled quicker than he gets us.
That was crazy.
All right, Bruce, you got any final stories for us before we wrap this thing up? We know Robert doesn't have any.
I have nothing.
No, I'm kind of storied out today.
All right. Well, that's all the time that we've got on the Small Church Podcast. We hope that you've enjoyed hearing some of these funny, humorous, and maybe a little sad stories. If you have your own, we would love to hear them, and maybe we'll do an episode sometime that shares some of our listeners' stories that you guys have shared with us. You can share those stories with us by reaching out to us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, formerly known as X, or X, formerly known as Twitter, and any social media platforms. You also can find us at higherministries.com, and we would love to hear from you. We want to thank you for listening to this edition of the Small Church Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, as you subscribing and commenting and sharing with your friends helps other people to find our show. We look forward to another week, another set of stories, and another life-changing discussions here on the Small Church Podcast. On behalf of Robert Kell and Bruce Montgomery, I'm Tony Marr. I want to thank you again for listening. Have a great rest of your week. This is the Small Church Podcast.